All right, let's do this. So my name is Erin Simmons. I am part of the internal marketing team here at Seer Interactive, and I'm really excited to introduce you to Teresa Lopez, our audience and content lead, and Dan Lauder, our paid media lead, focusing on audience and automation. So they're going to be chatting with you today about leveraging audience research for your paid media so you can stop guessing about your customers' needs. So throughout the webinar, I'll be available via chat if you're having any technical difficulties, sounding a little funny, anything like that, hit me up. I'll be on the back end of that. And then also throughout the webinar, if you have questions as they're going, make sure you type them into that Q&A box in the bottom of your screen. So as we are going through the webinar, I'll start to look at those and gather those, and we'll be able to ask those to Teresa and Dan at the end. So without further ado, I will let Teresa and Dan take over. Enjoy.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. So, as Erin said, today we're going to be talking about why it's important to stop guessing about your searchers' needs and talk through a list of different research methods that are easy and doable to learn more about what they care about so you can incorporate it into your messaging.
All right. So first, let's set the stage for our discussion today with a best practice. If you can't see, I'm using air quotes around best practice because the new best practice is not defaulting to a best practice. But for paid search marketers, this is definitely a trap that we fall into a lot. And we've all heard that we need to make sure that your ad copy matches your landing page and your keywords match both of those things. It definitely makes sense, but it leaves us open to a lot of assumptions. So assumption number one is, perfect. Whoever wrote your landing page had your audience in mind. This might be true, but it also might be true that they wrote it literally based on what the product or service is. In this example, we are looking at a page for a master's in library information science. And if you're just looking at the page from like your first glance, you're writing some ad copy, you're writing some keywords, you would definitely come to the conclusion that the page is about a library degree program. So if you're just reading this, you're probably feeling pretty good, which then would lead you to assumption number two, which is that people are using the words that you use to describe the product or service that the landing page is about. So you might come up with keywords like library information science or masters in LIS, which is the acronym for library information science. Obviously, those keywords are relevant to the program that we're trying to promote here, and they align to the landing page. So all things are good so far. So let's go to the next slide here. So you take your landing page and your keywords and you put together some absolutely inspired ad copy by literally repeating what your landing page and keywords are. So next. So you're feeling pretty good, you nailed it, right? Well, no. Throughout the entire process of writing these ads and keywords, we didn't really consider taking a step back and thinking about our audience in the first place. You know, like actually addressing the people that will hopefully convert on your landing page. So for all we know, we look just like this. Wonderful gif of Steve Buscemi, hello fellow kids. Or, go to the next, our copy resonated in the same way that this completely in-touch intern email resonated. Hey, Bay intern. Hell yes to getting lit on a Monday night. Definitely some people saw some keywords, plugged them in, and tried to just relate to the audience, but they likely missed the real intent of how millennials and Gen Xers are, Gen Zers, I guess, are speaking these days. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Teresa. Oh, whoops. Forgot about the results. So what we're going to talk about later is how you can actually optimize for your audience and stop guessing. And what this looks like in real life was for this library information science example, a 96% lift in conversion rate. And this is over the course of 6 months. So it's not just a flash in the pan, it's a prolonged improvement on performance. Yep.
So Dan will get that later in the webinar, a nice teaser to leave you with. But I just have a couple stories to tell. So fun fact, I'm getting married next summer, which is very exciting. And thanks Jen, something that I didn't know existed was in my venue contract, which is about wedding event insurance. So I was learning about that. It's another thing to put on my to-do list, and it was something that I had thought originally, like, sure, just put it on my list, I'll get it done, that's fine. However, about a couple months ago, my future sister-in-law got married, and she told me after the experience, she held it together during, but her DJ actually dropped out 2 days before the wedding because he was double booked and didn't get it figured out until 2 days before and then realized. So we were talking, and she's like, you know what, event insurance really saved me because my DJ was a no-show, I was reimbursed for everything, and I was able to get money really quickly to hire a new DJ, very fast. So my original conceived notions around event insurance was, I want something that's affordable and lower cost, but now that I know that it could actually, bad things do happen around weddings, I wanted to make sure that I was protected and I was covered if anything happens just in case. So I did a search recently looking for event insurance, and here were the paid search ads that came up. So a lot of highlights, most of the things that were referenced here are around price. So as low as $105, save money, least expensive, and it also talked about the speed in which you can get this insurance, because sometimes I think brides and grooms might not realize until just before the wedding that they need it, and they need instant proof of insurance. Great, sure, definitely want something that's affordable, but knowing what happened to my sister-in-law, I want to make sure that I'm covered and I'm protected. And none of that's really in most of these ads. And then if you look at the organic results, you can see things are different. So looking at mostly the meta descriptions pulled in for these search results, you can see things like protect and cover. It talks about a vendor incident or vendor no-shows, which I do know exist now and that it happens. That's much different language than just save money, save costs, get this done cheaply. And knowing what I know now about what can happen, this is much more aligned with what my need is and what I'm looking to accomplish. And then going back to the original paid search ads, you can see that at the bottom, the last ad does have something that speaks to this, but 1 out of 4 of these is really showing that the paid search marketers of these ads aren't really understanding my needs or keeping them in mind when writing this ad copy. So a couple more examples of what unstated consideration look like. Obviously, I'm one person, I'm a marketer, so I sort of understand these things. But we wanted to do original research to understand how people search, what did they type in, and then what did they think when they were going through all the results, and what did they care about. So these examples that follow are using a platform called Validately, which we'll talk about in the research methods, so stay tuned for that. But I wanted to give you a couple examples of what people are thinking when they're doing searches. So for these particular examples, we asked people who recently went on vacation and found their vacation packages through a search engine to describe their experiences and what they're looking for.
Okay, so when I went back to planning my last vacation, I love the desert, so I wanted to go out to the desert, and it's not very smart to just a New Hampshire person wandering aimlessly around the desert. So I wanted like a tour, somebody to take me through and see things they don't show tourists, and so I wouldn't die in the heat.
So it cuts off a little at the end, but what she was saying was, so I don't die in the heat. So before she even started, she knew that she had to be careful because she was from New Hampshire and wasn't really familiar with the desert and was concerned about that. She also mentioned wanting to be taken places where tourists don't typically go, and that's why she wanted a guided tour. So before she even began searching, she had these needs and considerations that weren't present in exactly what she searched for, but as she was evaluating the search results, those are the types of things that she was looking to connect with in results, paid or organic. Let's go through another example.
Now, when you get these things that say save up to a certain amount of vacation packages, those make me want to click on them more, quite honestly.
Okay, so this gentleman was going through, he searched for Las Vegas vacation packages. Sounds like a nice thing to do right about now. And he was evaluating the search results, and that was one of the things that he described as being interesting to him, and that's what he ended up clicking on, actually. And if we compare that to the actual search results for organic for Las Vegas vacation packages, you can see that a couple different organic results have this save up to dollar amount. So Expedia has it here. We're also seeing it for Travelocity in the description. So that was something that really connected with this person and something that was meaningful to him as he was evaluating results. And if you're thinking about vacation packages and deals, saving money and pricing always is going to matter. So it probably makes sense that paid search marketers included this in their ads, but they didn't. So they did talk about pricing, but in completely different ways and not something that really attracted what this person had wanted or been interested in clicking on. So they do things like from X amount of dollars, book together and save for airline packages and hotels, up to a certain percentage of total savings, but it doesn't use that save this amount of money that really attracted him. So clearly, we understand that price is important as marketers, but we're not really truly understanding what's grabbing these people and getting the attention that we should be incorporating back into messaging. Let's look at one more example video.
Obviously, I was looking for a 3-bedroom cabin, very specific, anything above 3 and, bigger, because I went with a group of.
So I think Dana and I also thought it was funny that she said, obviously. If you look at the search query, it's mountains in Tennessee cabin. So it's not really obvious to anyone that she wanted to have a group experience. So similarly, as I did in the last example, I looked at the search results to see, were people talking about the size of cabins, because we know that's important to people who are traveling here, just to make sure that they have the right fit. So this is looking at organic results, and you can see all of the highlights that there is a lot being pulled in around the size of cabins and the different capacity of cabins. If you're on the SEO side and are looking at this, you'll notice that things for the meta descriptions, it looks like Google is pulling in what they think is going to be best suited versus what the specified meta description is. But I think that even makes the point more that seeing all of these different numbers of bedrooms coming in really shows that Google understands that people care about the different options you have in terms of cabins. And then if we look at paid search ads, you can see one lonely highlight down here, and it's really an incidental mention of the different sizes of cabins, because it's talking about enjoying a free attraction ticket when you book a certain size. So people have all of these considerations and needs behind them that we're not really connecting with in messaging. Staying on that point, there's so much behind a search query as people are typing it. They have fears, like that woman from New Hampshire, expectations. They have situational context, which we'll talk about more. Brand awareness is another thing. Many people we talked to clicked on sites like TripAdvisor because they were familiar with them. And they also have aspirations. Sometimes they're looking to buy a product or use a service because they think they're going to be better or improve something or be viewed a certain way from this product or service they're looking to utilize. And really all of that is needs. There are needs behind searches that we should be paying attention to, especially when it's pretty easy to be able to understand those. The other thing too is I am most often not my client's target audience, probably not Dan either.
Very true.
And it's something that we want to make sure that we're not putting words in people's mouths. We're really understanding what they care about to create better marketing that connects with them, to be able to make sure our messaging really conveys what they're looking to accomplish. So we want to stop guessing, and that's what the presentation is about today. If you could tell for the title, we're going to be going through a bunch of different research methods that are pretty easy to get done. Some are very easy, some are a little bit harder, but really something that any marketer can do for their company or their clients. We want to be understanding the need behind the search, and the keyword here is understand, it's not assume. Assumptions can make you look like Steve Buscemi. It is not a good look for anyone for the most part. We want to make sure we actually understand through data what people care about. And this is also something that Google has mentioned is important as well. So Justin, the head of ads research and insights at Google, included this quote. And what really sticks out to us is that satisfying people's needs, by doing that, you have a better chance of influencing their decision and ultimately winning the sale. It's not just about, oh, I want to have messaging that looks a little better, but it's really about business at the end of the day and influencing decisions and getting that revenue that we're looking for when we're advertising to people. So today we're going to talk through 3 different categories of research methods that you can utilize in your day-to-day. So first is observing the landscape. So taking a look at existing public information that's going to be relevant to your company to better understand what considerations or needs people have. The second category is listening to your audience, and listening we're going to use a little bit outside the normal. It's not just audio, but really how do we take cues from your prospects and customers based on data that we have access to or people we have access to. And last but not least, directly asking your customers and prospects what they think. I think this can be really scary and intimidating, but it's really not. Oftentimes they're excited to help, and they are wanting to make sure that people who are like them are going through a good process and have all that they need. So we'll talk through a couple different research methods there.
Cool. So let's jump into observing. So the first thing here is form research, and forms are hotbeds for understanding your audience. Your customers are telling you what they like, what they dislike, what they love, what they hate, their pain points, their questions, you name it. They put everything out there for you to read for free. And it's an opportunity to really understand their needs. So I'm not going to walk through each of these bullet points, but I'm going to go to the next slide here and kind of go through the how. And you'll be receiving this, so you don't have to take a ton of notes and try to write all this down. But the first thing is very simple, is just identify relevant forums and review websites. Here's a link for some subreddit discovery. Search for threads relevant to your campaign. Maybe it's searching your brand or your competitors or your keywords. And then scraping relevant threads to aggregate data and analyze what people are talking about. So using something like an Ngram or word clouds to organize what's going on can really help you understand what themes are shining through. And then, the most basic one is just reading through and gaining insights and then acting on those insights that you find. So you can go to the next slide here. So like I said, the research is free and only takes a little bit of time or whatever time you want to devote to it, but it can literally be as simple as searching for your product or service on Reddit. So I'm going to go back to the library information science example here. And all I did was search for library information science on Reddit and just read some threads on what people were talking about and was looking for themes to emerge. And one of those themes was becoming a librarian, which will become a theme of this presentation as well. So once I found becoming a librarian starting to pop up in a few different threads, I kept digging. So if you want to go to the next slide here. And all I did was search become a librarian in Google, and I saw, oh, Reddit is one of the top suggested searches. And just by searching that, I found a bunch of other threads that were referring to someone becoming a librarian and a lot of comments and insights into what their major concerns were. So it just takes a little bit of effort and a willingness to dig through what people are talking about. So the next step in observing is observing the SERP. And for those of you that don't know, it's the search engine results page. But it's taking a look at what can you learn about the intent of your keywords, or looking into the new themes that you found from your forum research, or the messaging that you're currently using in your landing page copy or your ad copy. Google has millions of data points and is providing you with the answers for what people are looking for in the organic results and the features and the snippets like Teresa walked through with some of her previous examples. So you can move on to the next one here. So how does this work? There's a really cool new tool called Your Eyes that you can use to figure out a lot of the intent for what people are searching for. So all you do is search for your target keywords, review the SERP features and ask what features are present, what content do they contain, review the organic listings, what's included in the title tags, what do the meta descriptions say, review related searches. Are these searches worth addressing in the messaging. So here's a real life example, and also a big plug and shout out to our analytics team for being a premier GA360 reseller, hashtag sales pitch. Do people still say hashtag before things?
Well, now they do.
Well, now they do. But anyway, this is a real example, especially for those in digital marketing. So let's say you're looking to beef up your analytics software and you search for Google Analytics 360. One of the main things that is popping up are people also ask. So how much does GA360 cost is one of the biggest concerns that people are addressing whenever they're searching for GA360. So you can go to the next one here. And then if you look at the Google Analytics or the organic results for Google Analytics 360, you see a lot of things around what people are really searching for, like how to get started, what do you need to know, the benefits of GA360, premium version versus free version, all things that are very important, especially whenever you're looking to make an investment in something like GA360. So now if you look at the paid ads, two do mention pricing, which is one of the main things that people were also asking, but the headlines generally fail to address a lot of the organic needs from the previous slide. Things like how to get started, like I mentioned, premium versus free, major benefit call-outs. So the main lesson here is take the cues that Google is giving you and test it in your ad copy, because you could be missing out on a lot of really valuable clicks and really valuable sales. So now we're going to jump into some listening techniques. And one of the easiest ways to do this is by analyzing your search term reports and taking a look at your search queries. So the main thing that you're looking to do here is looking for modifiers and word choice, and do they line up with how you are presenting your ads and your landing page copy and the keywords that you're selecting. So how do you do this? First things first is downloading your search terms report, easy enough. And then utilizing a tool like Power BI to organize your data, and use something like Ngrams, like I mentioned earlier, to really find the themes that are emerging from your queries report. And if you're unsure about like what Power BI is, it's a free tool from Microsoft that anyone can download. We have a ton of videos on the Seer YouTube where you can learn how to do a lot of really cool basic Power BI stuff and even some advanced stuff. Will, our founder, walks through a lot of really cool ways to utilize Power BI. But with that, you can review data from those common words, compare common words in current ad copy and landing page copy, and then eventually the end goal is to create tests to include those gap words or those gap modifiers and phrases that you're missing in the copy that you're using. So go to the next one here. So what does this look like in real life? So these are some screenshots from Power BI, and this is literally just listening to what considerations people are searching for. So for one of our clients, a larger education client, we ran all their queries through Power BI, and we were just looking at Ngrams to see what popped up the most. And two of the modifiers that we saw that were popping up a lot were best and top. So people were looking for information on the best school or the best program or the top program to go for. So it makes sense. This is a little bit hard to see, but so we mentioned that we saw best and top showing up a lot in our search queries, but whenever you look on the right side, the description Ngrams is how often words from our ad copy were showing up. So we're literally comparing what's showing up in our search queries to what's showing up in our actual ad copy. And you can see in that little red box, best is super small. So of all the words that we ran through our search query report, we saw that best was the fourth most used modifier, but it's almost non-existent in our ad copy. So it's an opportunity for us to kind of take a step back and say, hey, what are people using to search, and are we addressing those concerns and those problems? So like I said, utilize those terms in ad copy to demonstrate authority and highlight relevant themes that your customers care about. Look for opportunities to really speak to your audience as opposed to kind of just taking that ad copy off of the landing page like I did at the beginning. That was a real life example of what I've done. So let's take a look at how we kind of flipped the script on that librarian example. We did the exact same thing. And one thing that we noticed, and kind of going back to the the forum research that we did, we saw becoming a librarian was very common across a lot of different threads on Reddit. And then whenever we looked at our search query reports, we also saw that become was one of the most used modifiers for our program that we were promoting. And on the right, you can see all of the different ways that someone might search for how to become a librarian. So this was a very quick, along with the forum research, cue and data points to say, hey, I need to test some new ad copy. I need to get in front of these people in a different way. So we did a very simple test, and this is literally all it was. We changed headline 1 from what I showed you at the beginning, MS in Library Information Science, which was literally just pulled off the landing page, and I made a lot of assumptions as to why this would be a good headline for ad copy, and I'm sure a lot of you are out there doing this exact same thing. I've been guilty of it for my entire paid search life, and we just switched it to become a librarian. Super simple, and this had huge results. It's crazy how big the results were for this. We saw click-through rate improve 105%, and conversion rate improved 96%. So obviously we saw CPA improve as well. And this is over an extended period of 6 months. So it's not, like I said at the beginning, it's not a flash in the pan. If you're speaking to your audience, you can see really long-term payoffs from just speaking their language and kind of treating them like they're humans.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
All right, so I'm going to go over website observation. So this is another method that you can use by utilizing tools like heat mapping and clip mapping to understand how are people moving within your page, what are they caring about. It's so fascinating. I come from the SEO world, and we want to create so much content and do so many things and create these big, long pages full of resources. But I don't think we often take a step back and see how are customers actually looking through those and what are they caring about and where are they stopping and pausing to see what's important and what really connected with them that we might need to be doing more of. So there are a couple different platforms. The thing that we use the most is Hotjar, and it starts at $27 a month. So it's a very, very affordable option. There's no long-term contracts. From a time investment standpoint, I have 3 hours on here to set it up and then do analysis afterwards. It's really not that significant amount of investment. And then here's how you do it. So it's gonna really vary based on the platform that you utilize, but the main steps are gonna be setting up heat maps on the pages that are really relevant to your campaign. So it could be an existing landing page if you already have one for paid search. It could be an organic landing page if you have that. Or it could be related informational content that you already have about whatever product or service. So I'll give an example about that right after this. You'll want to let that data collect for a little while based on how many sites or how many visits your website gets, or what period of time makes the most sense to review. And then you want to be reviewing those heat maps to understand where areas of high clicks or high interaction, or if we're looking at scroll depth, what areas or sections of the page seem to have quote-unquote warm areas of people viewing to get a sense of what people are actually looking at within the content on those pages. And then similar to before, you're going to want to understand the different patterns and then pull those insights and utilize that for some of your messaging. So going back to the example that Dan had before about Seer's Google 360 reseller program, we had a blog post that's very detailed and goes through a lot of different factors of what being a reseller means. It talks about Google 360, and there's a lot of information. So we decided to use a heat map from Hotjar on this page to see what people cared about. So this is just a portion of that page. And then this next slide takes a look at an overlay of a mouse map. So that's basically on a desktop looking at where people hover their mouse over, and it can usually indicate an area of interest as people are looking at pages. So if you see here, the lighter spots, the yellow spots, you'll also see red, are like slight orange. That's the areas of highest interaction, and then blue is just lighter interaction. So you can see sort of at the bottom middle of the graphic, there's a lot of highlighting. This is actually a factoid that we provided, that Seer is one of only 24 agencies in the US that is a Google 360 reseller or partner. So people really cared about that exclusivity that Seer has. There's also, in the last sentence, a little bit of interest around help get the most of the investment. And these were two things that we weren't highlighting on ads. So we want to make sure that we're highlighting that partnership because it is a rare thing to be able to get to that point. And we also want to use language and talk about help getting the most out of your investment. When Dan showed the ads before, there are a lot of things like see benefits and look at costs, but it's not really talking about getting the most out of your investment. I think we can all probably guess that Google 360 is going to be pretty pricey, definitely worth it for a lot of the value it brings. But you want to make sure you're maximizing that value. Here's another thing that we looked at. It's the same page, just another portion of that page. One thing that I really like to do when I'm running a heat map, I especially like to look at sections that have very specific either bullet points or different like tiles, because you can more clearly understand what people are focusing on, or in this case, what they're clicking on. So this is for, again, laying over and seeing what people interact with. You can see the highest amount of interest is around setting up dashboards and reports. This is not something we talked about in our ad as being a benefit to working with Seer for a reseller for 360. So that's definitely something that we'll want to be incorporating. And then also the first bullet, there's some interest around help diagnosing problems. So that's really simple language that we can add into our messaging and test to see how does this impact click-through rate, interest, how do people get into the website, and any conversions, because we're talking to people or touching on subjects that we know people are considering. Another thing that you can do is talk to customer service teams. Interviews can seem like a lot, it can seem intimidating. Customer service teams are a really valuable resource because they act as really good proxies for your prospects or customers. They are talking to them all the time, it's a big part of their job. And by understanding what these people are hearing and what they're continuously having to say or answer questions about, you could really learn a lot more about your audience and what are the common questions or concerns that they have. So the cost is free. You have these people in-house. If you work for a company, if you work for an agency, it can sometimes be tricky to get the right person to talk to get access to these folks. But what we did was focus on the potential benefits, and we were able to get access. And from a time investment standpoint, it's very quick. And it's pretty simple to get done. So in terms of how you want to make sure to identify members of the team who worked closest with prospective customers. Sometimes this might be a customer service team, like I've been saying. Sometimes this could be a sales team member. The hard thing with sales team members is you have to understand there are going to be bias towards the company. They're in sales after all. It's probably part of their job description. But we'll want to make sure that we're trying to ask questions to get out bias and just have them sort of regurgitate what they hear. So some questions you might want to ask are, what are the questions you get asked most often? If people continue to have the same question over and over after they review your website or come into the website or know your brand, that's something that is a good indicator that they have different considerations around that we might want to allude to an ad. So for the 360 example, people have a lot of questions about cost. You might want to allude to that in our ads if we can help you understand the pricing tiers or whatever that might be. What are common concerns that you hear? Sometimes this is going to be maybe not something that you would consider or think about. It can be really revealing to understand what's causing people to have hesitations and incorporating that into some of our messaging so that way we can assuage the concerns before they even get to the website. Another question that I really like to ask is, what information do you get asked for that currently isn't on the website? Sometimes customer service teams like, oh, I just emailed them this brochure that we have. I was like, let me see that brochure, because none of this information is included on any landing page anywhere on the website. It's a really great resource to get in touch with these folks and just talk to them. You'll want to just review the responses, gather them into themes. It's something called coding, and then test those in messaging and see if any of those better connect with users. So a couple examples that we've had, I've just sort of generalized these based on a lot of examples that we've had from clients. She popped in. For one customer service we talked to, they had mentioned that we assign one customer service rep to each client, and they have a dedicated rep. And then they customers tell them that it feels like they're an extension of the team. Two things that we learned. One, we had no idea they had a dedicated customer service representative, which is huge. If you think about being a software company and every time you have an issue, you get passed to someone else and someone else and someone else versus getting passed to Dan every time, and Dan having some understanding of your business and having some experience, it's a much different experience that we want to be highlighting in our ad copy. Extension of their team is huge. I think if I was a small business owner and I was nervous about what, including different software companies and bringing different people into the mix, hearing this would really help me to feel comfortable with this brand, and that might be messaging that we can incorporate into ads to see if that helps encourage other people to click through. Another example is for a customer service team member about pricing. So they get a lot of concerns about pricing, they get a lot of calls about pricing because they custom scope what it is. So if you've ever gone to any page or like SaaS page with pricing, it's like, we'll custom scope anything, you just have to call us. I think people can get kind of antsy around that and tend to not want to give someone their phone number and create that point of contact. But what this person had said was, we base on actual needs. We don't give people what they don't need because that doesn't make any sense for their business. And that's huge. If we want to say we custom smoke based on what you need versus like what you don't need, that's going to be a big difference. Get what you want to have versus things that you don't need. It's going to be a big difference when we're talking about custom pricing versus just if we had standard, like just call us for pricing and no examples as to why that's the case. The last category here is ask. So let's directly interact with prospects and customers to see what they think and really dig in. The first thing that we have here is customer interviews. It's going to be similar to customer service interviews, but talking directly to customers. In terms of timing, we usually have these around 35 to 45 minutes. It'll depend with either existing customers, or we also can recruit through third-party recruiting prospects who fit your audience or a lookalike audience. So you can ask them a lot of different questions from their motivations, from what their search journey looked like, to their considerations, or what did something have to have before they converted. You really have a lot of opportunity to get questions answered that you might not have data for otherwise. And it's really helpful to learn from people directly. I think we can look at Reddit, we can look at a lot of different sources to understand what's happening and see different insights, but to ask why or to keep digging further is something that's going to be uniquely suited for some of these direct interaction methods. In terms of cost, it's really about incentives. Sometimes we've had customers do it for free. Oftentimes it's a really nice gesture to add some sort of incentive. It could be a discount for your product or comped products or a little package or a gift card. It can be fairly inexpensive based on who your customer is. And the time investment isn't crazy significant. It'll be a 2-hour setup to put together questions, make sure you're aligned, and make sure you have all of the different schedules in place. But other than that, it's going to be maybe an hour and a half tops to do the interview and then look back on your notes and put together insights. So in terms of how, obviously there's a lot of different steps here. So like Dan said, we'll be sending this out so you can follow this along, and we'll be providing more resources. But a couple questions that I wanted to highlight here when you're talking to customers is, what problem were you trying to solve when looking for X? And that's a really good question because it can get you from not just like thinking about features of your product, but what are the benefits? So I wanted to become a librarian. That's really what they were trying to accomplish versus I just want this degree. They wanted to become something versus just get a piece of paper. And I think that's really important for us to think about, especially if we're not our own clients' audiences. Another question is, what information were you searching for when you began searching? So are you looking, do you have questions? Are you trying to decide between products? Do you even know what this product or service really does? That's really helpful to understand kind of the maturity of the customers and what information you might need to provide, or what considerations to mention. Another one that's going to be similar is, what is the biggest benefit of using this product? Again, we want to be thinking about the benefits to mention in results and ads versus just the features. A couple tools here, we've been having tools on the side, and we'll definitely follow up after the webinar with the whole list. One thing I did want to call out is Calendly. It is a tool that allows you to put together your list of availability for your calendar based on Google Calendar, or at least that's what we use. And then it'll allow people to schedule meetings based on the time limits and the time windows that you set. So that way you don't have to worry about how does Tuesday from 4 to 5 sound, or what is but can I do Wednesday from 2 to 7? Like, it's just gonna make it a lot easier to have people book themselves versus the emails back and forth. The other thing to hit on here is that we want to talk to recently converted customers. If you have someone who's a really long-term customer, they've been with you for 7 years, they probably don't remember what initially began their search or what problem they had that they needed to begin solving this problem. You want to look for people within a 90-day window or a 6-month window to make sure we're getting people who came in more recently. Some examples that we have from clients. This is a quote for one of our education clients. I was looking for a school that was willing to accept someone who didn't take a traditional path. I was looking for testimonials of people like me. So testimonials we know is important content. It's really solidified by talking to this person. But the biggest insight that we got out of this is that there are people who are non-traditional students. Maybe they do a 4-year bachelor's degree, and then they take time off and eventually come around to get their master's. Or maybe they go to high school, graduate, take 2 years off for traveling, and then want to come back into academia. They want to make sure that they are going to a school that has people that also followed a non-traditional path. So we also found out we have the testimonials, so we also wanted to create new pages that talk about non-traditional student experiences to make sure that we know we're connecting with people who have this type of background. The second example is about situations and how those can affect how people search and how they make decisions. So it was time to replace our carpet, and based on a previous bad experience, we wanted to make sure we picked something pet-friendly. By saying pet-friendly, we already know someone's situation. They've had a bad experience in the past, and they want to make sure this is going to be pet-proof. You also see things like kid-friendly. A lot of times when we're doing interviews, you understand more of the situational context of where someone's coming in, that we can say okay, I've never really thought about that in terms of types of flooring. So when we're talking about ad copy, maybe we want to say kid-friendly or pet-friendly and list different options based on common situations that people have. Another one that we have here is moderated behavior observation. Very wordy, but basically these are 15 to 30-minute sessions where we observe users go through a series of tasks and ask them what they think. So we typically include these with interviews. We'll do part of the first part to do an interview and just ask them questions, and then we'll ask them to share their screen or use a certain platform and go through different scenarios and just kind of watch them and ask questions about what they do. It relates back to what I showed at the beginning about some of those videos, and we'll talk more about that. And the reason why is to really understand the considerations and also kind of take a step back and see what people are doing. I think there's a huge gap in knowledge of what actually happens on the SERP. We know we put ads out there, we see click-through rate, but we don't really know why any of that's happening. And these moderated behavior sessions allow us to get to that why. Similar to interviews, the cost is going to be an incentive. Or if you use a platform, that's also going to be part of the cost. But let's get into some of the things that we want to ask when doing these observations. So we typically do it based on prompts. And because we're in search, we like to ask people to begin searching for whatever client's product or service they bought and see what did they type in, because that's a ton of information, but also understand what results stick out to them. What are they clicking on? What are they focusing on? And then asking why. That's really important to really get to the bottom of what people are caring about. And then once they get to a result, asking, does this page meet your needs? Asking why or why not. It allows us to better understand not only their path, but what they like and don't like within those pages or the different content they encounter during their path to really get a good sense of what's going on. We've also used this for pages that we're testing or for competitor pages to compare and contrast what we think we're going to do if we have a page in mind, but we want to see how they react to competitors to get a sense of if we're on the right track with recommendations or not. Another thing here that's really interesting is you want to observe any tendencies that you're observing and seeing that customers or prospects aren't even knowing that they're doing. So an example from a couple years back is that someone was searching for a best laptop, and they were looking for, I think it was maybe best laptop for like watching movies or something like that. And as she was going through, she said, I'm familiar with Best Buy, I'm familiar with CNET, and continued to mention all the brands she's familiar with and said, like, those are really big and important to me as I'm looking at results. But we noticed that all of the ones she clicked on said 2019 best laptops for watching movies. And she didn't even realize she was clicking on the current year, but it was something that we could observe because we were watching her go through this process. So sometimes there are innate things that people are doing that we can't even, they don't even realize they're doing that we can utilize in our research. So here's an example that we have for a client. This is looking at an existing page they had. So this is from the SEO side, but the example still stands. The client already ranked well for some of these terms for a page about project management alternative to Microsoft Project. And if you look at the existing page metrics, it's a 54% bounce rate, which isn't great for this type of page for them, and a 1.4% conversion rate, which is what they wanted to look to improve. And the page before was fine. It talked about what was wrong with MS Project, and it talked about, you know, some of the things that they had assumed matter to people. But we actually talked to people to get a sense of what did they expect to see on the page, what do they really need, and they wanted a comparison chart, which is pretty straightforward. I mean, I think that's kind of a no-brainer at this point. But what they also found was customers were saying, well, I see all of this stuff about MS Project and why it's bad. You can see it makes communication challenging. But it never talks about what our client offers instead. So what is the benefit of our client? It shouldn't just be, well, we're better than MS Project alternatives, but here are the things that are really important to you that we want to make sure we're highlighting because we know that's what people care about. And making these changes across the page increased conversion rate over 300%. So it's a really significant change just by talking to a couple people and seeing what is this page missing and why is it not hitting the mark. A very similar method to moderated behavior observation is unmoderated behavior observation. So whereas before, for moderated, we're sitting on a call with them or we're in a platform and we're moderated to people tasks, and there's no moderation included. So the advantage of this is it can happen really quickly. So instead of having to organize schedule to get all of that together and ask for 1 hour of time, you can do this a little bit faster and just do smaller snippets, maybe 15 minutes, to get a sense of what people are caring about. In terms of the cost, I really want to highlight this. It can also be really inexpensive. So for Validately, if you are part of that platform, it's $15 per person to recruit someone to go through these different tasks and prompts. And that's what we included in the videos before of the different vacation packages. It was all done through Validately, and it was very, very quick to happen. Similarly to moderated behavior observation, we want to understand what people are doing and what they're considering as they're going through either search results or websites to get a better sense of what we want to include in our messaging or what content we might want to change in our landing pages. So the specifics are really going to depend on the platform. The two kind of main categories here are identifying the target audience that you want to recruit and developing something called a screener to pull in the most relevant respondents. So for the vacation example, we pulled in people who had gone on vacation within the last, I believe, 90 days, who used search engines to find their package. So we wanted to make sure that they were people that we wanted to talk to based on who our target was. And then we asked several different prompts. A lot of these are really similar to moderated, but you'll notice that we give instructions for people to type in the words, speak aloud, and answer questions because we're not there to ask them. It's really important to have all of those things listed. And it's also really critical to test all of these prompts before you even start the sessions to make sure you're not leading anyone astray or the questions make sense. So like I said, the example that we used before for travel packages was part of the unmoderated research. So here's the example for Las Vegas, and you can see on this right-hand side, there's different tasks that we ask people to complete, and we also can ask questions of what people are looking at. So In this case, do any of the results that you were looking at have anything in common? They're able to answer these questions as well. You can also do surveys afterwards if you ask them to review a couple pages and say, like, which one did you prefer? Which one did you think would be most important to you as you're going through? It's a really great way to get data in a fast way and a fairly cheap way to get a much better understanding of how your ads should look and messaging should look before just assuming. So just to wrap up, we went through a lot of different methods today. Again, we will send the deck because there's a lot going on, and it's definitely a lot of methods to try that aren't really not too time intensive, rather. Things that you could do for literally no money, things you could do for a little money, just to get a better understanding of what people are looking for and to stop guessing. So in terms of the ask, we really just want you to try one of these research methods when you're doing ad copy next or working on landing pages next. You don't have to do all of them. That would certainly be a lot, but just try one because it's really important to stop making assumptions, stop thinking we know about people, because in the examples Dan and I went through before, it's clear that we don't really know people and they have a lot of considerations that we may have never considered. So the ask is really just try one of these. And if you're interested in learning more, we talked about a lot. There's a lot of different details and intricacies for all of the different research methods. We're actually putting together a bigger research guide. So starting in December, we're going to start rolling out different chapters around research methods, why this should be done, how to do it, and tools to utilize. So that way, when it comes time for you to try one of these methods, you have a really easy to follow guide for what to do and how to look at this and analyze it. And then on Dan's side, how to incorporate it into testing.
Yep.
So sign up for Seer's newsletter to be alerted when that's published, and you'll be the first to know. All right, we are now at the question and answer portion. I'll let Erin jump back in.
Cool, thanks y'all. We have a couple of questions coming in, but overall I think it's great to have this kind of like layout, right? Because audience research kind of sounds intimidating from like a bandwidth and budget perspective. So I love the menu options that you gave in terms of like lowering that barrier to entry for budget and bandwidth. So thank you. Gonna kick off with a couple of questions over here. Are there any industries where you've been really surprised by how much audience research sort of changed the strategy, or like gave you more insights, or really just made you rethink the industry as a whole?
Yeah, well, I'll start. Definitely the higher education industry. I think as marketers, and definitely in the education space from our experience, people are so focused in on what the program or degree is. They're just like, this is what it is, and these are the features, and it kind of goes the same for like any industry, but specifically education. It's like, this is how we call it, and it's just, we're stuck in our ways, and this is kind of what it is. But whenever you do a little bit of research, you find a lot of aspirational type of queries out there. Like, with the library example, I want to become a librarian, or I want to do something specific, as opposed to I want to get a piece of paper and a degree. Like, it's not really about the degree, it's about what's after the degree, and that's a huge miss for a lot of higher ed specifically, but for a lot of other industries.
I have an example also. So we used to, a couple of years ago, we did research for a home inspector company, and what the assumption was that all of our audience are previous contractors. That's what they are. People get out of contracting business, they want to do something a little bit quote unquote easier, they get closer to retirement, so they understand all of these different very technical contractor language about, getting this, I believe it's a certificate program. But what we found was actually talking to customers, none of the people we talked to were former contractors. So all of our ads had very specific technical language about why you want to get this certification, but none of it really talked in a basic language of what this actually meant. and people were getting really confused. So they completely rewrote all the different meta descriptions to talk a little bit more basically about what the certification was and what you could use it for, and they saw a really significant click-through rate. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was a really significant improvement because we talked to the customers they actually had.
Awesome, cool, great examples. So we have about 5 minutes left. One of the questions coming in from one of our attendees are, do you find there's a lot of noise with tools like Hotjar, or I think maybe even audience research in general, like a lot of sessions, but maybe no particular insights? You find you're doing like a lot of weeding through that noise?
Yeah, it can definitely sometimes be challenging. Sometimes when that's happened to me, I've thought like maybe this isn't the right page to look at, or maybe I just need to gather a couple more responses. But when we're thinking about any of the audience research that we're doing, we're trying to give insights or pull insights to test. So any of the methods that we went through today and any of the insights, it's not about saying like, okay, I have these insights, this is gospel, this is everything. For the 360 example, it's pulling little inklings of things that we're seeing and then testing them. So does this work or does this not work? So it's getting a little bit more incremental information to then see how the audience reacts and how that then performs. If you're doing something like Hotjar and you're still seeing like, I really can't tell up like heads or tails from this, if you're looking at a heat map, you could also switch to different methods within Hotjar. Sometimes a poll could be a really good example of asking people, how would you improve this page, and getting direct feedback, because then it's not really guessing what people want because they will tell you what they want or what they don't like. You can also ask what information is missing. That's a really good way to get an understanding of what people need that they're not getting that might not be indicative from observing a heat map.
And one thing just on top of the testing portion is, and I think it's really important to just kind of reiterate, is that you just need to keep testing and you need to keep iterating with your test. It's not just, oh, I did some research on become a librarian or did this Hotjar thing and I did a test and now wipe my hands and I'm done. It's, you do it again. You pick a cadence, you figure out your testing schedule, and you keep going. And eventually, I think the noise starts, you kind of start to see through the noise because you're continually testing and you're continually looking at the data and the research.
Awesome, thank you. Super helpful to provide like an actionable plan too when you are seeing that noise. So we're just about at time here, so I'm gonna let that be our last question. I do have a couple of questions still in the Q&A. We will reach out to you directly with answers. As Teresa and Dan said, we're going to be following up with an email. It'll link out to all the tools they mentioned. We'll do a recording of the webinar in that. You can choose to sign up for the newsletter if you want to wait on that research guide and all that good stuff. You can respond directly to that email if you have additional questions, and the three of us will be behind that to help you answer, to help get you an answer. But thank you again for joining us. We hope it was helpful, and we will hopefully see you soon on Seer's next webinar. Thanks, y'all.